It's great to be here. Thank you, Paolo, for the kind invitation. Today, I chose a title that is called "Is Software Eating Finance?" And that's it goes back to an article that I read last year in the Wall Street Journal by this gentleman, Mark Andreessen, who founded Netscape and then now has I think one of the largest VC funds in Silicon Valley, and he had wrote an article saying why software is eating the world. And one of the quotes there that I put here is, I expect many more industries to be disrupted by software. And this is against the background of what has already happened, right? We all know that the music industry has been disrupted. We no longer use vinyls, CDs, or store it on the hard drive. We all listen to music, the big screen. Cars essentially used to be mechanical masterpieces, right? And now today cars are computers on 4 wheels. So big disruption. Books, obviously, in the US, we all went to everywhere. We went to bookstores, and they basically all disappeared. We download the books, so we have them shipped from Amazon. Movies, similar story to music. Like we don't go to we go much less to movie theaters. We don't have DVDs anymore. We watch them at home through new providers. Photography, it goes without saying, like Kodak went bankrupt. We now have all digital photography. Gaming, we don't buy the games on big DVDs anymore. We do them online, or we download some of them. And then the question is finance, right? I mean, I think we all often, like in this circle, we say there's a lot of disruption in finance. But maybe the disruption is not so big compared to the other industries. Right? We still have huge banks, there are a lot of startups, but in a way, I get the feeling that disruption is a little bit behind in finance. And what I want to address here is to find out why this is, or maybe what lies ahead, right? And Andreessen, he also doesn't say a lot about finance. So the only example he said, yeah, there are now some new card providers out there, but that's not really disruption as we have seen it in the music industry. So I think something that is, to me, is quite interesting when I look at this question is when we look at Spotify. And there's a movie out there on Netflix. It's called The Playlist, and I really recommend watching it. There's like 5, 6 episodes, different angles of what happened at Spotify. And then one episode has the lawyer at the time at the center. She was called Petra Hansson. And she said, remember, the one thing that music exec hate is change. And the one thing that tech guys hate is compromise. And in a way, the guys who don't like change, I think, are the bankers, right? These are the music executives, right? They would like the world to go on forever the way it is, right? And then we have a lot of tech guys that come up with new projects, and they know what is working, with small contracts and everything. But in a way, 2 things have to come together. And then there's another quote in the movie from Daniel Hellar, the founder of Spotify. He tells the lawyer, we are the future, Peter. We make the rules now. So there's a sense of Spotify had a new approach. They knew how to run the technology, right? And the founder says, look, now we tell we make the rules, how the music industry works. And in a way, he was right, right? They found a way to have the music execs accept Spotify as a new model. I would claim here that that's a big difference to finance, right? The innovators don't make the rules. Finance is different because the rules are made by someone else, by the regulators. Like, so the innovators don't have the power to change the rules. And I think that's one of the reasons why my progress probably was a little bit slower, right? There's nothing to negotiate in a way with the regulators. They say what they, how things are done. And one example I think is Libra, right? We had one of the most powerful companies came out. They said, look, in half a year, we launch a global stablecoin. And they failed because the regulators said, no, the way you want to do it is not compliant with our rules. Right? So I think this is a very good example of how the game is played. Even very big companies cannot make the rules. So now, but what is at stake here? I do think it's really an important topic. I found this study here. It's about the cost of trust. Right? So it says that about 35% of US employment is related to providing trust. So if 35%, so it's not just in terms of number of employees. So that's huge, right? So if we find in finance ways to provide trust more cheaply, right, then the savings are huge. And you all know that a lot of blockchain and P2P is about decentralized trust. You also refer to this in your opening statement. So it's really, this is a big topic. If PVP can reduce the cost of intermediation of providing trust, we talk about very big numbers. We don't talk about something on the margin. So it's really a key topic. Right? So it is important, and that's why I think going forward, there needs to be a solution that allows P2P schemes to foster. But when we talk about crypto, I think that's another slide I found. It's not mine, but I think it's indicative. It also goes back to a post that Paolo made last week about FTX. When people talk about crypto, often they don't really talk about crypto, right? They talk about off-chain solutions, like crypto exchanges, most stable coins, right? And these are not, they trade crypto, but they're in a way centralized, very conventional institutions. And what is really crypto is a pretty small share of the whole of the whole universe. And when we talk about like the centralized institutions, I do think regulation is in a way straightforward. Right? If you run a crypto exchange, but you should comply with this regulation we already have had for many years on exchanges. Right? It means that you need to have a good price setting mechanism that doesn't allow market abuse. You have to segregate client assets from your own assets. You have to hold the cash in a safe place that protects your investors. You have to have a settlement process that is very fast, that doesn't give rise to credit risk. So we know how to do this, right? And if you look at FTX, for instance, nothing of this time-tested provisions were applied, right? They should have been applied, right? It doesn't make sense that an exchange holds shares in in Robinhood, right? No regulator would allow a normal exchange to do that, right? But they are not regulated properly, so it's fair. And a lot of the failures are really in traditional centralized institutions. And the reason is because they are not held accountable to normal provisions. So I think going forward, this piece is the piece that can provide decentralized trust and bring the cost savings. But the question is really, here I think there is a challenge on how financial market regulators regulate the true peer-to-peer piece. And I want to illustrate this quickly. By the way, I want to illustrate how regulators think, and this is part of my past 4 years of experience of talking to regulators in the project we have on a commissioned blockchain-based payment system that we want to launch. It kind of showed me, it really illustrated me how regulators think. And that's a challenge for peer-to-peer. And the key thing is, on top of their mind is who is accountable. For everything that can go wrong, there always needs to be someone, a person or a committee that is accountable. They don't accept the fact that there is a smart contract doing something, or that there is a bridge between one blockchain and another one. They want to know who is accountable. And so this call is really very broad, this approach. For instance, a big topic is governance. But the notion of decentralized governance is alien to a regulator. Governance means there needs to be a board, there needs to be a CEO, there needs to be a chief risk officer, there needs to be an internal auditor, there needs to be an audit committee, there needs to be a risk committee, there needs to be a compensation committee, and there needs to be a company, right? You need to be incorporated somewhere. And it's not just about the Basel Committee, that's really everywhere, right? That's what you need to have in place if you want to be regulated. Then there are the principles for financial market infrastructures that in a way, these are payment systems, CCP, security settlement systems, and so on. And it's pretty much the same, right? There is a principle on governance, exactly the committee structure, CEO. There is important risk management. Who is managing the risk? Which person? Which policies do you have, etc. So it all goes. It goes to financial market infrastructures as well. Another big topic is outsourcing, right? If you're a company that provides something in the financial market, you are not doing everything yourself, right? So you will outsource certain services, like software, right? You will ask someone to write software for you. There's a framework around that, how you manage these outsourcing relationships. If you say, I use open source. For critical functions, this is probably not going to be acceptable. They will say, you need in-house software developers as well, because we don't trust this open source community. Very stringent. The other one is cloud services, like financial sector is moving to cloud. So there's here in the UK, there's discussion that cloud service providers will be regulated directly. Like how do you apply this to a blockchain? If you need to have a contract, you have to make sure that your cloud service provider is sound. Now, how do you do this in a public blockchain environment? I don't know. You have to find a way. You have to be creative. And lastly, something I know it exists here. Maybe it exists somewhere else. there's this senior management and certification regime. This means that if you are in the financial sector, you have to show that you choose your staff in a sound way, and that your staff is, when senior management, is competent, right? You have to demonstrate how you make sure that senior staff is competent. It's a big burden, right? And in a decentralized world, how do you enforce this? How do you comply with this? So I do think it's really that's the state of the world, right? And then we have the decentralization forces on the other side. And in a way, I see a lot of tension there. And so this is my last slide. In a way, one has to square the circle, right? How can we reap the benefits of decentralization with this way of how regulation is done? So the first option is just to say, I don't care. It's all decentralized and maybe and everything, and it's very difficult for enforcement agencies to go after me. I think it can be done at a small scale. We all know that, but I don't think it's it's a viable business model, right? If you say I ignore regulation, you are not going to be a part of the financial system. It's not going to happen. And then option two is that you say, okay, I have my project, but it's hard for me to comply with all the laws. So you hope for DeFi-friendly regulation. And that's, for instance, I think in the US stablecoin debate, I see a lot of this. So they say, oh, we want to be regulated, but it has to be our way. But we don't know when this is going to happen. I think we don't know how this would look like, and B, we don't know whether there's the political will to really have DeFi-friendly regulation. And the third option is then you just bite the bullet, and you say, okay, this goes back to the tech guys in the Spotify example that don't like to compromise. And you say, then I have to make compromise. Right? Somewhere I need to have a governance structure that the Bank of England or the FCA approves. Or I need to have executives. I don't use open source software only, so that you try to find a way to be able to move within the existing framework. And we don't know what will happen between option 2 and 3, but I'm curious to see that. I mean, also hear your views of what you think will happen. Thank you. Yeah, sure, if we have time.
So I have some question, Daniel, if I may, about the accountability problem that you described very much. You mentioned during the presentation. So you somehow boiled down much on that. Also, the previous slides boiled down much about accountability. Who is accountable for now? But there are some things, processes that really, even from a tech guy, it's difficult to understand who is the ultimate accountable person or agents that need to respond to the regulators. And I see this, actually you mentioned this tension, right, between the centralized world and this world that requires some, advice on some principles and the regulation. So I think that in the future, this tension is not sure that this is going to be resolved, but maybe it's going to amplify this tension, because I see an extension of this machine eating finance somehow on one side, and the state that of course wants accountable operators. So it doesn't. I mean, probably the solution will never happen, because these two worlds being able to talk to each other will never be able to talk to each other. What do you think about it?
I mean, that's definitely a possible path, but it's just not possible. And I do think, I mean, there are ultimately the goal is to have safe financial services. I mean, I do think that you don't need to have an accountable person for this to happen, right? You can really have, if you can demonstrate that you have that your software is sound, they should be fine with this. But I do think they have to make a step, towards really looking at it from a risk perspective. Maybe I give you the example again of the open source software. Why should it be safer to develop software in-house than open source? If there is a glitch in the software, with open source, you will have this fixed very quickly, probably quicker than if you do it in-house. That's a fact. But does the Bank of England accept this? Not yet, right? But I think this does not make sense, right? They should say, or like the cloud. I mean, if you have like diversified, if you have 10 different cloud providers, why should this not be safe if you can switch from one to the other immediately? Why do you just have to insist that this is not allowed? Right? So I do think there needs to be a mental process, but it's never who is accountable will not go away.
Thank you very much for a very inspirational talk. And I'm from Sochiro from the University of Tokyo. And you mentioned about the Libra. And I read many articles on the Libra that Facebook people said that they had to give up the project because the regulators didn't say yes. But I was not sure what kind of regulation was actually invaded by the project. And it's very common to issue the stable coins. So my concern is some company can do that, but Facebook couldn't do this because just they were too big. So my concern is the kind of regulation is sometimes operated arbitrarily. So is it good governance as a kind of operations of the regulation? And so many things are not written, but the regulation people can decide what we can do. So I think this is kind of a big problem for the future innovations. What do you think about that?
And the Libra is a big topic, right? But I do think they made it. I mean, to me, I'm still at a loss how they could be so naive and saying we launch in half a year a global stablecoin. Going back to this, if I offer a product in US dollars, the US will want to have a say. If I offer a product to American citizens, the US regulators will want to have a say. Thinking you can just go to Geneva and have a foundation and then launch globally, it's just, it's a no-starter, right? And this will not go away very quickly, right? And I think now if you look at the stable coins now, they are much smaller, right? They say it's in US dollars, we know that with whom we have to talk, right? It's in euro, we know with whom we have to talk. It's much easier, right? But saying we go global, it's just with American clients, it's impossible.